Hey there, this is the Resistor Vic Podcast. I'm here to get folks thinking about politics as something that's really about regular people like you and me, and to realize that together we can make a difference. I'm Vic Myers. Welcome to the Resistance. So here we are going into our third week of the Epstein shutdown. Yes, I said the Epstein shutdown. And as much as I would like to take credit for that, the credit goes to Angry Male Veteran, my friend over on TikTok, but he also has a YouTube page. If you like my content, you'll like his. He has some really good stuff, so check him out. But anyway, third week of the shutdown, no progress. We do have Mike Johnson trying to avoid the Epstein files. I think that's a big part of what's going on with this shutdown. Another part is Trump doing everything that he can while the government is shut down to break government as much as possible. And that's where we are with the shutdown. What else do we have going on? Oh, wait, I forgot to mention Mike Johnson trying to distract from the shutdown by railing against the No Kings protest tomorrow. Well, we're recording on Friday, so come Monday, we'll know how the protest went. Anyway, Mike Johnson is trying to distract by calling the No Kings protest all kinds of things. It's a Hamas sympathizing gathering. It's a Antifa terrorists gathering, all kinds of things. And I hope you all saw the press conference he was giving when he said the scariest thing he's seen about the protests in Portland. And he sounded like he was really terrified. And he was talking about the nudist bicyclist. And I just thought, man, if that scares you, what kind of a childhood did you have? Could you imagine him in a horror house? Anyway, No Kings tomorrow. I hope you were there. And speaking of protests, I'm going to talk about my guest with this some more. So I'm just going to give a hint. Protests are toppling governments around the world right now. And it's not guys who look like me who do it. It's young people that are doing it. What do Letitia James, James Comey, and John Bolton all have in common? They've all been indicted by Trump. And you got to love the irony in some of this. Letitia James prosecuted and got Donald Trump convicted of felonies. And now he wants her to have her own felonies. James Comey, in my opinion, was partly responsible for Trump winning in 2016 when he came out at the last hour and talked about Hillary still being under investigation for emails. And he was Trump's guy. Trump loved him. And then now today, John Bolton, former national security advisor under Trump, has been indicted. And the thing he was indicted for was he had top secret documents at his house. I wonder, I have to wonder, were they stored in his bathroom like former President Trump's top secret documents are stored in his bathroom? And the indictment says that he was sharing top secret information. Well, what about the top secret documents that Donald Trump was showing around at his dinner table there at Mar-a-Lago? I mean, the irony is almost too much to take. Anyway, we're here to talk tonight with my guest, Chris Callis. Welcome, and thank you for coming on with me tonight.
Thank you for having me, Vic.
So you were running. When I invited you on, you were still a candidate for the U.S. Congress in Illinois. Tell us about that.
Yeah, things changed pretty quickly in a campaign. So I was running in Illinois' 8th Congressional District, and it is a busy race for those of you who are unfamiliar. Before I dropped out, there were 9 of us that were in it.
Holy cow.
Yeah, I know. And it's essentially a smattering of centrists with kind of a progressive paint job, as I'd call it, and 2 real progressives. That was myself and the person I ended up endorsing, Junaid Ahmed. And that was before kind of AIPAC and the centrist Dems rallied around to find a candidate that they wanted to run, and that's Melissa Bean. She was the 9th entry, so she entered right before I dropped out of the race, and she had held the seat previously back in the early 2000s, and she lost to a Republican and then took a cushy job at JP Morgan. And I haven't seen her financials this cycle, but the last time she ran, JP Morgan and ExxonMobil were her two biggest donors.
And I'm sure if she's AIPAC's pick, she's not going to have problems with money.
From what I understand, AIPAC interviewed 3 other candidates in the race. I was not among them, nor was the progressive that I'm endorsing, Junaid. So I don't know exactly who, but 3 of the other than 6 candidates were interviewed, and AIPAC decided that they were so weak that they couldn't possibly beat either Junaid or myself. So they dredged up Melissa Bean, who I call Melissa Has-Been.
Wow. Yeah, I hadn't heard about her and AIPAC. The fact that AIPAC is now picking Democratic candidates, that just makes me want to chew on broken glass. I mean, holy crap.
You know Graham Plattner in Maine, right?
Yeah.
Same reason why he now has a competitor in the primary, where he's obviously the front runner. He's front runner. He has already gotten the support of most of the important unions in Maine. There would be, if the shoes were reversed, and there was this centrist Dem who was already well ahead in the polls and had been doing this for months and had gotten all the support, and a progressive had come out, the entire establishment would have decried them as like, oh, they're ruining the unity. They're trying to break up the party. But the other way around, that's what they do constantly, is that they don't really want the progressive. It's why it took so long for Hakeem Jeffries to be able to endorse Zoran Mamdani in a very milquetoast kind of way. Well, I think he did. From what I understood from the conversation he was having, that he basically said he is the Democratic nominee, which is, I think, is as close as you're going to get to a full-throated endorsement.
What a worthless piece of garbage Hakeem Jeffries is. And please tell me that the person that you endorsed is a younger person.
Oh yeah, he is. Junaid he's a great progressive. He has the pedigree for it. He was not in the race when I jumped in. I jumped in when I didn't know that Raja Krishnamurthy, our previous House rep, was going to drop to run for the Senate. He had one of the largest war chests in the House, so it was a possibility, but it was also possible because of the shakeup that he was just going to keep his head down for another cycle. But he ended up leaving. It left me kind of there in the race. I was the first one in the group that's still in to announce. And then people started pouring into the race, including Junaid, who had run previously against him in the last cycle. And so he had a pretty good apparatus that he could kickstart again.
So what caused you to get in?
So it's 2 big things caused me to jump in. And one stems from my upbringing. My mom taught me that if you know the right thing to do and you don't stand up and do it, then you're doing the wrong thing. And I have a political science education, and I truly think that the corporate Democrats in Congress have left the rest of us behind. And the reason they've done that is because they can fly back, get a bunch of donors to rustle up $1 million so they can talk to 1,000 people and get $3 million in donations. And then they can fly back to DC, even though our districts are 762,000 people, right? That's such a small percentage of the electorate they actually have to deal with. So I knew, because in Congress, it's something like 70% of Congress total is corporate interests, and that extends to the Democratic Party. I just did not think that they were going to do the right thing. And the reason I didn't think that is because I spent 18 months seeing all of the mailers that they kept sending about how bad Trump was going to be. So I thought during the State of the Union address, they were going to have a unified protest. And when I turned on the State of the Union and there was one good protest, and I think it was Representative Green who started yelling and talking over Trump, I thought for sure he was going to end. Then the next Democrat was going to step up, the next one, and they were just going to derail the thing by continuing to yell that he was a convicted felon, and that anywho,
they did what they always do.
Nothing. Well, they had their own little groups who talked to each other, and then they held up pink paddles, or they held competing press conferences where they invoked Liz Cheney and Ronald Reagan for some reason, or they did something in the chamber at the time. But it was disjointed, and it gave me no confidence that they were ready to step up to the moment, let alone that they believed any of the mailers they'd been sending out to raise money.
So are you telling me that you weren't just down to your bones, heartfelt inspired by them wearing white suits?
No, I was not. Whatever they thought they were projecting, each of the little individual groups, what I saw just struck me with fear for the country, because without a potent opposition who knows the levers that they can pull, then yes, they were right. This fascism that is on our doorstep could very well like truck through the front door. They were the ones that were the last line of defense. That's why we kept sending money. That's why we wanted to get them into Congress. And it seems like that just didn't coalesce into a group text where they all got on the same page. And so that truly, I was stricken after that. And then a week later, when I thought, okay, well, this is the real fight now, because they're going to hold firm and they're going to shut down the government. So that, because we all know there are only two things that are certain in life, and that is death, and Republicans will pass a tax cut for the wealthy. Exactly. And they have done it every time that they've had both chambers and the presidency. Heck, they've done it when they've had both chambers and didn't have the presidency. And so you know that they're going to do it this time. So if you bring the fight to shutting down government, and then you get all of the Democrats in Congress to go out and lock arms in front of these organizations that Doge was going to go in and cut, all of a sudden you've got a lot of leverage where you say, we're going to assert the power of the purse, and we're going to stop Elon Musk from doing whatever he wants to do. And at the same time, we're going to stop Republicans from passing this tax bill we know is going to kill people. Literally, I did the calculations for my district based on the loss of income and the loss of medical care. We're going to lose about 5,000 people from my district a year when this all kicks in fully. Yeah, I mean, they're just going to die early, right? That is a unconscionable outcome. So that was like the thing that drove me to want to stand up and run in the first place. And when I stood up, there was a chance that I was going to be standing up against Raja Krishnamurthy, who I did the FEC research on. He takes AIPAC money. He's kind of a corporate Dem, same as the rest. He generally votes the right way, but you know, they only cave under a lot of social pressure to do the actual right thing. Like, he wasn't signed on to banning the bombs at the beginning of my campaign, or many of the other progressive agendas that had kind of popped up this cycle. And so that's what kind of pushed me to stand up.
About the other Democrats who were moderates with progressive paint jobs. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have to remember that one.
I tell you, I don't like gossiping, and it's hard, but it's hard not to with a campaign, because you're always constantly around, you know, familiarity breeds contempt. I was around the other candidates some weeks more than I was around my own wife, because we'd be going to the same events hour after hour. I'd hear the same speeches. I'd hear them come off and start talking to people, and you get a sense of them. And then I'd start meeting their friends out in real life, and not one, but two separate candidates in my race who were younger people like me. I met their friends of theirs since high school, and both of them confided in me, yes, I'm supporting my friend while they run, but I want a real progressive to win. So even that, like, their friends from high school know that it's a veneer, and you have this social status of wanting to help your friend. But then at the same time, if you are a progressive and you want progress, they're not going to go to the polling booth and pull the lever for them. There's not a single person who worked on my campaign or was a friend of mine that you could talk to who wouldn't have said, yeah, I'm going to vote for him, like 100%. Which, like, that is why I thought I was doing quite well in the race up until Junaid like blew the doors off of fundraising this last quarter and got all of the endorsements that I could have gotten to keep myself going. But against the other centrist candidates, I was very strong.
So tell me again the name of the guy that you are endorsing.
Junaid Ahmed. Junaid.
Okay.
And then Ahmed.
I'm gonna look him up, and I'm gonna see if I can push him. You should say, hey, if you're interested in going on this tiny little podcast, I know a guy.
I will, absolutely.
I would love to have him on. So what did your wife say when you told her that you were wanting to run?
She's very supportive. So we were I'll tell you a little bit of the background financially of where we were at. So not this year, but last year, I was working in a marketing career, and I got laid off. And so what ended up happening after that layoff is my wife and I had to figure out what we were going to do with the rest of our lives. We had plans of starting a small business, but I got laid off right at the same time as the election last year, which meant that the tariff scare already pushed a lot of things to be more expensive. And to be honest with you, my wife and I were planning on dipping into a second mortgage against our home to be able to afford the equipment, but it tripled in price overnight. So there was no way, and it was going to be a small puzzle manufacturer that we wanted to make in the suburbs because my wife loves puzzles. So that was kind of a plan of ours, and it just didn't. it wasn't going to work out. And after I got laid off, it was going to be financially irresponsible to try to pursue that. So luckily we hadn't started any of this in the year leading up to the election because we knew there was a lot of uncertainty. We also kind of saw my layoff coming from a little while away because the company I used to work for got bought by venture capitalists, and they were quite obviously winding down the Chicagoland office.
What kind of work was that?
So I was in marketing, and so I was in salt, the industry that I was working in. I was working for
Salt,
Morton
like
Salt.
table salt?
Yeah. Well, it's like you can look up my profile on LinkedIn and find out my professional background. But I was working for what used to be a Chicagoland company, Morton Salt, but now is a Kansas City company. I basically, my wife and I go down to the ramen budget, and we kind of see that this layoff it might be coming down the pipeline. We prepare for it as if it's going to happen. So we cut all of our extraneous spending. We go down to more or less living on her income and then trying to save mine. And we hit a point where she was working 2 jobs and overtime to be able to keep us afloat. And we ended up, after our unemployment ran out, and the first check I got for unemployment wouldn't even cover average rent in this district. So we were very lucky. I was very lucky to have her support at all. When unemployment ran out, it was time to decide what to do. That happened to be March, which was the same time that all of this went down in the House with the Democrats not showing up. And since I have a political science education, I was following the situation quite closely. I knew that the election was coming up and that we had a corporate Democrat who was in our seat. And that gave me an opportunity to potentially flip that seat to be able to enact my novel congressional strategy, which I'll get into in a minute. But then to answer your question, how did my wife take it? I kind of brought her the plan, and I was like, hey, I have this education. This is what I want to do. Here's how we can go about it. Would you be willing to go do this with me? And she says, how much can we put into this? And we did the math, and we decided about $8,000 to kick on costs, because I didn't know how to start a fundraising apparatus, even though I have the education, political science, and I worked on a campaign before. Being in a high level campaign was just different. So we decided on that amount of money that we would self-fund to start the campaign. And then she ended up, during that time, transitioned to a singular job where she was working overtime. And now we're transitioning her. She's just got a promotion, so she won't have to worry about doing overtime, and we're good. So at the same time I was trying to run for office, I was also taking care of the house. So I cook meals, and we're in the middle of an emergency renovation because we had a sewer backup. So it's been very busy and taxing during this, especially petition season. So to tell you the truth, when I found out that we weren't going to be able to continue the campaign, obviously I was sad that I wasn't going to be able to help the American people and enact my strategy, but I was also very relieved because my schedule freed up to be able to deal with my home situation a lot more.
So it sounds like it was just bad timing.
Truly, it was bad. Well, it was bad timing. And then also I was a first-time candidate, so there's always stuff to learn, right? Just like you said when we were talking in the pre-show a little bit about your previous runs. I learned a whole bunch. I couldn't have gotten a better education for the amount of money we spent on this campaign. And most of that went... Oh, go ahead.
I can tell you what you're going to be doing over the next few months after you decompress a little bit. You're going to sit down and you're going to write down a campaign plan, what you would have done different. You're going to take all the things that you learned, plus your education, and you're going to find yourself writing a plan. Mark my words. If I ever talk to you again, you're going to say, you were right, Vic.
Oh, yeah. I started journaling specifically during this campaign for the first time, and it has been so helpful for exactly those reasons. And I haven't gotten into a full plan, but you're right. It's already percolating in my mind if this opportunity pops up again. And I've made such incredible contacts through this. I was working with the Justice Coalition, and one of their members contacted me right after she found out that I conceded. And she's like, hang on, let's find out if we can pivot you into a state race or if we can pivot you into a commissioner's race. And I told her, it's like, I was doing this because I had a clear idea of how I could actually go in and help and be the change that I wanted to see in the world. And I won't just jump into a race just to get into electoral politics, but there's a ton wrong at the state level too. So I was happy to look at it, but they were using the wrong address for me. They were using my campaign address and not my home address. So none of my races are really up. And pivoting, honestly, in the last 2 weeks of petition season, more or less, I think that is a stress that I don't need to put my family through.
So you guys don't have caucuses there? You just have petition to get on?
What is that?
You guys don't have caucuses in Illinois?
Caucuses, no, we do not. We have a archaic petition structure where it's, I don't have one handy, otherwise I'd show it to you, but you can change a whole bunch about the top of it, but it has to be 10 signatures, and then you have to get that page notarized. And every 10 signatures, you have to get notarized. And we had to get, probably I had to get 1,200 signatures if I wanted to be safe, but it was like 780 or so was the minimum.
That's about how many I got the first time I ran for school board. It's about how many votes I got too.
That's the funny thing about it, getting into these electoral politics, is you realize how small the numbers are compared to the actual potential voters of the district. It's crazy that to be able to get on a race for U.S. Congress, all I would need would be maybe 1,000 signatures, where there are some sheriff's races and stuff that require more than that in the surrounding counties.
Well, it's a lot harder than that here in Colorado.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, there's two paths in Colorado. You can petition on, or you can go through the caucus system and get voted onto the ballot at the state party convention. Well, you have a convention for your district, and then you can also opt to try both. You can be doing the petitions while you're doing the caucus. But I think you need more than 1,000 signatures. I could be wrong, but I think it's more than that.
No, that's very likely.
What were your primary issues going to be, or what were they?
Yeah, so I had a domestic policy plan that I called the Working Families Bill of Rights, and that was 8 guarantees. It's kind of modeled after the New Deal to be able to get us the rights that we deserve. And I'll just go over the top ones, and I made this to begin with policies that just followed my morality, that made sense for us to fix for the American people. And then I modified it as I went, as I talked to people in my district to get an idea of what was most important to them. And that's how I ordered them. So number one is universal health care, because when I talk to people, finding out that 50,000 people die every year, and now I think this last year it was 62,000 people die every year just because they're too poor to afford healthcare, is unconscionable in a country that makes as much money as we do. Number two is getting money totally out of elections. There's not a single person I talked to on any part of the aisle who wanted us to keep money in elections. So that means stopping money lobbying, and also getting all ability to make money from stocks while you're in office overseeing those.
When you say there wasn't anybody you talked to on either side of the aisle, you're talking about constituents of both parties, right?
Yes, right. Okay. Talking to Republican leadership is a mixed bag of what you're going to get, but talking to normal people, everyday people, I couldn't find a single person who was pro-lobbying or pro-money in politics. And most people unprompted, I didn't do many, because I was running in a Democratic primary, I didn't do many constituent calls that ended up with conservatives or Republicans. But, you do every once in a while. So maybe 1 out of 50 calls or so, I'd end up talking to somebody who was Republican leaning. And they'd agree on 90+% of the issues that I put forward in the Working Families Bill of Rights. It's just all about how it's framed. You'd have a bunch of people who say, well, I think the Democratic Party's gone too far left and I'd never support leftist ideas. And then we'd get into it and we'd start talking through my policy platform, which again is basically FDR's policy platform. And they would agree with every single line of it. So that was number 2, is getting money out of elections. And then number 3 is reforming our immigration system. It is so top of mind for people. And even though we have, I think on the Democratic side, all of the actual facts and figures to show that immigrants are a contributing part of American society in pretty much every metric, and immigrants commit less crime than native-born populations, that message is not going to assuage people's fears because they don't know how the immigration system works. If you ask 10 different Americans, how do you come here to this country the right way? You get 10 different answers. So a big part of my platform was reforming the immigration system, amnesty for people who are here, who are just living their lives normally, creating I think my plan had 8 immigration centers, 5 across the southern border, act like Ellis Island to do vetting in a very quick, efficient manner, and also to staff them up with the lawyers and judges you need to be able to quickly vet cases, not just for asylum and for visa programs, but for citizenship applications, as well as on-site airports for humane, quick deportations for criminals who might be trying to sneak in.
We don't have an immigrant problem. We have an immigration system problem that nobody wants to address.
100%. And the thing about all these programs, and then also a living wage and getting to a 4-day work week, as well as affordable housing and childcare, universal childcare, universal education, 2-year education in trade schools, and as well as saving our environment. And in this program, creating 500,000 good paying jobs, trades jobs, in 250,000 in the construction corps, which is just reviving, again, an FDR era program that gets people trained up in the trades and then gets them out into America building houses in places that people actually want to live. Because one of the biggest issues in housing is people don't live in the structures that they want to. Something like 60% of people who live in apartments or condos, they want to live in a place where they have like a freestanding house. And the reason that they don't is they can't afford it. And condos and apartments are the affordable alternative for them. We can be building more houses. Oh, right. Yeah, right. And they're not affordable. I mean, the rent is more affordable than the mortgage because you don't have all of the baggage that comes with it. But it is that we have an affordability crisis. And that's the reason. That's what my domestic policy was trying to tackle. I won't go into the long spiel on it, but essentially, if you take the top 4 costs for the American household, the top 4 are housing, which is $2,000 per month, childcare if you have 2 kids. So imagine a family of 4 with 2 kids under 7. That is the costs that I'm going off of. $2,000 is housing. $1,800 is how much it costs to have 2 kids under 7 in daycare. $1,600 is the employee part of health insurance, not including the $1,000 that the employer pays. And then $400 is student loans. $1,600 is the is the amount that you pay as an employee. The employer, generally, on average in America, pays about 40%, 45% of the costs of your premium healthcare, which ends up being about another $1,000 on top of that $1,600. But that would be your benefit. That would be your pay if we had a universal healthcare system.
The more you talk about all this, the more frustrated I am that you dropped out.
I know. It's if good ideas won elections, we would have a lot better government. But it is cash and endorsements.
So Junaid Ahmed, the guy that you are endorsing, how in line with what you are running on is he?
So he doesn't have the Working Families Bill of Rights, right? So he doesn't have that necessarily same policy position that he's putting forward, but he lines up like across the board with all of these desires. If they were presented to him, I know he would vote on them. Now, the difference between him and me, I think when it comes to Congress, is I have the blessing of ignorance. I don't know what I can't do, so I just do it anyway. Things that I really wanted to do was take over the caucus. There's going to be probably 25 to 30 progressives, depending on how these elections shake out in the midterms. Because the margins are going to be so thin because of this mid-cycle redistricting battle that's about to take place over gerrymandering, my guess is that 25 solid progressives would be able to do the same thing that Matt Gaetz did in this last Congress, which is take over the caucus with a very small group. You do that, you say, Mr. Jeffries, we're not going to vote for you unless you pass this agenda, or we put in, we can pull your speakership with any vote from any one of us.
Well, based on one headline I saw today, I would say that maybe that's going to be even easier than you're thinking, because did you see that Seth Moulton, who is running against Ed Markey, returned all of his AIPAC money?
Oh, no, I didn't see that.
Because he said because of their support for Netanyahu. So I'm thinking that, that's the first brick to fall. I think we're going to see a lot more of that as the the election gets closer and closer. You're going to see people realizing that they've got to distance themselves from AIPAC and they've got to start moving towards the FDR type thinking again. And I think that's for as bad as this administration is and this Republican-led Congress, for as bad as it is, the one silver lining that I see that I'm holding on to for hope is that it's going to be bad enough that the 26 and 28 elections are going to result in electoral reform in terms of people saying, get the hell out. We don't want no more of this corporate, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, we don't want any more corporate politicians. We're going to start electing Main Street people again. That's my hope. So I can see a demand for national health care coming out of what's going to follow in the next year and a half, 2 years.
Oh yeah. So I'm an analyst at heart. And having the education that I had, we have been through these kind of party switches before where you have this realignment of voting constituents, which then kind of changes the makeup of the party, or the party kind of changes positions and that changes the makeup of their voters. Republicans have been through what I would call a very fast transition from the W era Republicans through the Tea Party movement, which was a transformative movement, into the populist Trump era kind of Republican Party. Democrats are going through a very similar but much slower transition. And this started, I would say, back in 2004, 2008, where the corporate Democrats started to take hold in the leadership positions of the DNC and the Democratic Party at large, and started directing a lot of the donor activity, which led to what we've seen as like kind of this corporate takeover. And there has been a slow backlash to that, whereas more and more of these corporate Dems become a little bit, what do I want to say here, vulnerable to being attacked because they take APAC money or they take corporate money from progressives within the party. And those progressives, it's like a iceberg is the analogy I like to use. Icebergs, they're generally heavier on the bottom, lighter on top, right. But through various factors, the bottoms can chip away until they're lighter, and then there's a flip. And the bottoms flips up to the sunlight, and you have basically a new iceberg. That's kind of where I see the party going. The progressives are on the bottom right now, gaining steam, and the iceberg is going to flip over with progressives at the top. But it's going to take this kind of era of pain that we're about to go through to wake up a lot of the progressives that we're going to need to be there in Congress.
You know what else I think it's going to take is, and this is one of the reasons when somebody shared one of your TikTok videos with me, and I was like, hey, I like this guy. I wonder if he'll come on my podcast. And even though you're not as young as you look, I still think that it's people like you who are young. And something I alluded to in my opening about protests toppling governments around the world. I was reading an AP article today, and let me see if I can bring this up. Is this the one? Yeah, look at this. In all kinds of countries around the world, Gen Z, Nepal, the Philippines, Indonesia, Kenya, Peru, Morocco, Madagascar. These are places where young people are stepping up and saying, we're not going to put up with it anymore. And the issues are the same. Affordability, housing affordability, wages, the ability to just have a decent working life without being under oppression. These are just common things with all these countries, and it's young people who in all of these governments have stepped up and said, pardon me, I don't usually say this, but the young people are saying, fuck you. We're taking ours. And my generation bears a lot of the responsibility, and my father's generation bears more responsibility. We left you and my kids with a really messed up system and a really hard life to live. And if you're
I'm millennial.
You're a millennial? Your generation was left with a mess. So if your generation steps up and says, we're taking over, that could be the best thing that ever happens. And if my generation has to pay part of the price for that, who are we to complain? That's how I look at it. So I'm really hoping that your generation is going to step up and say, screw you guys, we're taking it.
Well, we're motivated, but the thing you always have to look at is the economics of the situation. And all the way back to the Roman Empire, leaders have known that the most danger to the stability of a country comes from an unemployed young populace. If you add uneducated in there, it makes it even worse. And right now we have nearing a 10% unemployment rate for men who are graduating from college. We are being put into a situation where, one, they don't care if they have to tear down the system to be able to make a living, because what has the system done for them? Who can blame them when you graduate with $30,000 in debt, so you're already having to pay back $400 or $500 per month, into an economy where you can't get a job, where your unemployment lasts for 6 months, where your job's now maybe being taken by AI if you were trying to get an entry-level position. And any position that isn't being taken by AI in entry-level is starting to be done then by the mid-level managers who are hanging on for dear life, hoping that AI doesn't replace them, as all of these services are being outsourced to a wholly different company as everybody is losing their livelihood. I can't blame the angry young people out there who want to be able to burn down the system and build something new. What I hope is that these next couple of elections are a wake-up call. And like you said earlier, APAC money and corporate money is almost toxic right now. It's going to become the number one issue of this election, primary election for Democrats, because young people are so fed up. And if the Democrats in charge refuse to see the light during this period of time, and still try to hold on to power and try to push young people out, then the Democratic Party is going to collapse before we're going to be able to make any progress. And that's why I'm very hopeful that progressives will be able to take over the caucus and force the issue, because there's a lot of centrist Dems who just want to go along for the ride. They just want to keep their jobs. They don't want to be primaried. They don't particularly care if progressives are in charge and they have to vote for progressive agendas. They just don't want to have to work too hard to do it.
Yeah, like my 73-year-old senator running for re-election. If I have a primary choice to make, it's the younger one.
Yeah.
I mean, plain and simple. If you're 73 years old, I mean, he's already a millionaire. He voted for literally half of Trump's cabinet guys, and he thinks that he should be re-elected. Why?
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about some of the, 7 Democrats who have died over the past 18 months in Congress, which is the reason why the majority is as thin as it is. There are unseated Dems, and they would have been seated Dems potentially to be able to stop the passage of that Republican tax bill if we didn't have Dems who were too old to run, who decided, no, I got to white knuckle it until the very end so I get that sweet retirement package.
Or they kicked the bucket and they weren't around to vote.
Right.
I was so angry in the run-up to the last election when I looked at some of our candidates. Grijalva in Arizona. He knew that he was, 1 foot in the grave and 1 on a banana peel, and he ran for re-election. I mean, and there were 2 or 3 others that have passed away. They were the same way. They knew that they were on death's doorstep, and they still ran for re-election. And it's just the selfishness of the octogenarian Democrats just drives me up a wall.
The selfishness of old leaders is a parable that we have had to deal with throughout time. And the ones that figure it out, the ones who understand that the real power in your last 20 years doesn't come from holding on to the actual button. It comes from being able to educate the next generation who are going to be pushing that button. And it comes from making sure that you find the right ones to be able to carry on your legacy and carry on the progress, rather than having a job until you drop dead, which is what a lot of these people feel like they think it is.
So that's a great time for me to ask you what's next for you, because I've got things going in my head on what should be next for you, but what are your plans?
Yeah, so the immediate plans are to take a little bit of time off. But in that time off, I'm not stopping from my organizing efforts. In the far future, at this point, I'll keep my eye open to see if there's another electoral position that makes sense for me. I have a lot of thoughts on how to fix the state house as well.
It sounds like you know where you need to be. You just haven't admitted it yet. And I certainly hope, based on what I've seen before you came on in our conversation tonight, I sincerely hope that you are not going to walk away from the world of politics, because we need people like you in elected office. So
I appreciate that.
Go work on Junaid Ahmed's campaign with him, and maybe you'll end up being his chief of staff or something when he gets elected. So
yeah, no, when I conceded to him, he said that he wanted to support me in a future run. So I mean, if that's how my opponents see me, then imagine how my supporters see me.
Yeah, and also the Illinois Democratic Party would be crazy to let you escape. So there you have it, folks. Let's see, next week, my next episode, I'm going to have Tricia Calvarese, who is running in Colorado CD4. She ran last time against Lauren Boebert, and she's running again, only this time she's going to have a primary. She's going to come on, and we're going to talk about how her race is going. In the meantime, thank you for making me a part of your day. Good day. Well, folks, looks like we're back at the barn and it's time to call it a day. I sure do appreciate you spending your time with me. If you want to help keep this podcast going by supporting me, you can get a paid subscription on Substack, where I'm Resistor Vic. Or if you're the type that'd rather go to PayPal, I'm also resistorvic@gmail.com. Thanks again.